The hype surrounding this year's NFL draft is snowballing rapidly, and for Eagles fans, there's one position in particular that continues to flood news feeds, timelines, and all of our dreams on a nightly basis. It's been a long time since we've seen a wide receiver class this deep. The names that could gracefully fall into the laps of Howie Roseman, who currently holds the 21st selection in the first round, could all very well be bound for stardom. The names beyond that may hold just as much potential, and the same can be said for the next round and a half or so. But before the Eagles even think of drafting a wide receiver, they have a very important question to answer. What exactly are they looking for? Before we get into that though, guys, it will be amazing if you could leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and if you haven't yet subscribed, we are drafting you to be our shiny new running back. We want you to run between the tackles, barreling down the competition on the way to joining our offense. Okay, so we're going to hand you off the ball full of daily Eagles content. All you've got to do is put on the afterburners, take it to the end zone, and subscribe to the channel, and before you know it, we will be destined for the Super Bowl. So what exactly are the Eagles looking for here? Is it a game changer, a speedster, a wide receiver one, a slot guy? It's not as easy as just looking like a talent such as Henry Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy and saying, yeah, that's going to magically fix everything. But to fully understand that, we need to examine the broader picture. The Eagles may have a very fluid offense, but they still have a very rigid structure, or at least to the naked eye. Each receiver role within the offense has specific desired traits, and without going into too much detail, here's everything you need to know. Wide receiver one, since the arrival of Doug Peterson in 2016, has been all about size. It's someone that can command the attention from an over-the-top safety or the attention of your best cornerback because of just how physically dominant they are. They can win at the catch point, they can dominate the top of the route, and more importantly, they've got all the other requisite traits a receiver needs to be dominant in every phase of the game. And that's why we see Alshon Jeffery screen punt. Yeah, don't ask me either. But while they may be tasked with other things, blocking is absolutely important, but most of all, it is someone that can just be dominant at the catch point, can box out those smaller receivers, be a weapon inside the red zone, and just command the attention of the defense. They can't let him go unnoticed here, because he's a threat wherever he touches the ball. Now, wide receiver 2, in order to complement that size, is someone that has the need for speed. The Lightning McQueen of the offense, if you will. We've seen Torrey Smith, Mike Wallace, and of course, Deshaun Jackson. All of them have succeeded to varying levels, and I think the one thing that we really do need to see this offseason is that need for speed fulfilled for the long term. But that brings up a series of questions we will address later on. The main threat of this receiver is obviously, as you may have guessed, their absolute lightning pace down the sideline. While they can do most of their damage on go routes and corners and posts, their ability to ruin defenders underneath is unparalleled. And believe it or not, Deshaun Jackson has been used frequently in the slot during his time in Tampa Bay, and he scored a touchdown for the Eagles working out of the middle as well. It forces defenders to play off coverage because they really don't want to be beaten at the line of scrimmage, and it will force defensive coordinators to try and find a way to bracket him off, to try and force him into turkey hole places only. Like, you don't want him in a man situation where there's no safety over the top. You want to make sure there is at least some sort of help or some supporting cast, because if there isn't, as the Washington Redskins found out last year, it can be very problematic very, very quickly. As for slot receiver, it feels like this could go two ways. We've seen Nelson Agholor rise, fall, rise, and then fall again. We've seen Jordan Matthews, who was inherited by Doug Peterson and then later moved to wide receiver 2 during his second stint with the Eagles. And then we also saw the Golden Tate trade, where the Eagles had tried infrequently to run a lot of trick plays, a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of gadget plays to get Agholor in space that just didn't work. So they bought Golden Tate, kind of added another chef into the kitchen, and that didn't work until the very, very last breath of the postseason, in which case, fair enough, did they get their money's worth? That's a debate for another day. But what do the Eagles do now? It's evident that Nelson Agholor isn't going to come back. They need someone who is going to rip up those yards after the catch, that can make you flustered with his footwork, his twitchy route running. That's the kind of player I think the Eagles want. But they could also look for a big slot receiver, someone that's 6'2", 6'3", very much in the mold of a WR1, but can play inside a lot more as well. And we will touch on that later. That's very important to remember. So now we know the rough structuring of the team, let's take a look at the wide receiver depth chart, and there are 5 names to note. Alshon Jeffery, Deshaun Jackson, and Nelson Agholor are our starting trio, with JJ Arcega-Whiteside as a WR4, and Greg Ward Jr. probably being the backup slot guy at the moment. Beyond that, you've got names like Shelton Gibson and Deontay Burnett, all of whom should be battling during training camp. But let's take this on a player-by-player basis, because the second you dive into individuals, that's when this problem becomes very apparent. It all starts, unfortunately, with Alshon Jeffery. The Eagles guaranteed his 2020 salary during the heart of their 2019 campaign, meaning that as of right now, Alshonimus is on the books for a cap hit of $15 million, making him the 7th most expensive receiver in the league. And while his presence on the field helped members of the offense thrive due to the attention he commands, a receiver costing $15 million should be bringing a little more to the table than 850 yards per season, something he has not done since joining the Eagles to begin with. So what should the Eagles do with a receiver who's underwhelmed on the field and has been constantly linked with noise off of it? It's at least understandable, first of all, to see why Jeffery would be frustrated. A wide receiver one being overshadowed by a tight end is one thing, but watching Deshaun Jackson just waltz in and steal your quarterback bromance is something that's gonna sting a little bit. He's nearing 30 years old and has been battered and bruised in each of the last few years, and time is running out. Regardless, if the Eagles trade Alshon this offseason, they will only swallow a cap hit of around $16 million, but if they cut ties with him altogether due to no team wanting any part of such an extortionate salary, that leaves them with a cap penalty of $26 million. Getting rid of him is the motive here though, and the cap hit is irrelevant. It's still not as simple as a dumping of the salary and running to the podium to pick up that sparkly new receiver, and that's because, well, this guy exists. I want you to cast your mind back a little under a year ago. The Eagles drafted a receiver by the name of JJ Arcega-Whiteside. The Stanford product here was built in a near identical mold to Alshon Jeffery, which naturally led everyone to believe that he would be his eventual replacement. Not only are their frames only a few pounds apart, but JJ became renowned for his prowess in contested catch situations and the ability to box out defenders. He finished his final collegiate year with a grade of 95.5 on targets that went beyond 10 yards and a grade of 90.6 on 3rd and 4th down, which was number 1 in the nation according to Pro Football Focus. It's absolutely dumbfounding then that they found a way to make him learn the entire playbook from every wide receiver position, essentially making him redshirt his rookie year. 169 yards and a single touchdown don't exactly scream a tremendous success given how desperately the Eagles craved any kind of production last year, one where Mac Hollins was taking snaps over the rookie for a large chunk of it. Whatever the reason is behind J-Jaw's bizarre rookie year, the Alshon Jeffery decision may hinge on just how confident the newly remolded coaching staff and front office really are on him. If they get rid of Jeffery and draft a name like Denzel Mims, for instance, it's not exactly the biggest vote of confidence in Arcega-Whiteside's ability. We surely have to assume that if Jeffery exits the picture, J-Jaw's the natural wide receiver one, at least to begin with, because if not, then not only is that a terrible draft selection and a waste of guaranteed salary that's dug the team a very deep hole, but it's a very, very big cause for concern. Unless he can play in the slot. It seems inevitable that the Nelson Agholor experiment is over, in Philadelphia at least, and believe it or not, J-Jaw had the same 40-yard dash time as Miles Sanders. After taking a punt on Agholor's 5th-year option went about as successfully as the Alliance of American Football, unless it's a massively cheap deal, then bringing him back makes just very little sense here. There will be some logic in pushing J-Jaw into the slot. He played 11% of his snaps there as a rookie, and he'd fit that big slot mold the Eagles have toyed with in recent years. And realistically, if he can't fill that hole, it'll be hard for him to have any role at all, especially if they do draft an eventual replacement to Alshon Jeffery again. So, where are we now? Well, if Alshon departs, then there's no wide receiver 3 with a huge cloud of doubt over JJ Arcega-Whiteside. Wide receiver 2, things don't exactly get brighter. Deshaun Jackson is going to cost the team $8.6 million next year, which is fine, but it's not ideal considering his age and ever-concerning durability. Drafting his heir to the throne does make a lot of sense here, but if it gets to pick 21, then which box is being ticked? A potential starter in the slot, or WR1, or the speedy wide receiver 2? Oh, and we haven't even mentioned free agency yet, where of course Robbie Anderson exists, and has apparently been a love interest of the Eagles for quite some time now. His skill set would match up perfectly with Deshaun Jackson, and you could easily see him line up in the slot for a year until Jackson maybe considers moving on or a reduced role, but if that happens, then how many of the receivers at 21 will realistically fit that rigid Alshon mold? It's confusing. On the surface, the Eagles' need for a wide receiver is simple, but after looking at it for longer than a split second, it's a situation that can easily cause you a migraine or 12. The Eagles have to go through a flowchart of decisions that all start with the basic question: do they believe in JJ Arcega-Whiteside? And if they do, what happens to Alshon Jeffery? Do they need a starting slot receiver or a backup behind Deshaun Jackson? And if they are taking a receiver at 21, which role is he going to be drafted into? Because if Mike Groh comes out and says that Nelson Aguilar's wearing too many hats and that's the reason his development stagnated, then they do the same to Arcega-Whiteside, somehow I don't have the tremendous amount of confidence the Eagles can take a wide receiver if one mold and push him into another. To put it bluntly, if there's ever a time for the Eagles to flush their receiving corps and start building in a new direction, it's now. It just so happens that the stakes could not be any higher regardless of whether they choose to do so or not. But let me know what you think down below, guys. Were you aware that the wide receiver picture was this complicated, and how would you go about fixing it? I want to hear all of the opinions, all the thoughts right down in the comments below. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Liam Jenkins PSN. I'll see you soon.